Are presented until the end. There will be a microphone right here in the middle, and if we have enough time for questions, we'll have you each step up one at a time to the microphone to ask your questions. Please go ahead and turn your cell phones off and put your Blackberries on vibrate so we don't have any interruptions. We will begin the afternoon sessions on time at 1 o'clock, so make sure when you get your lunch you're back up here by 1 so you don't miss any of the exciting presentations. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator, Mark Musaus, who is the Fish and Wildlife Service Deputy Regional Director for the Southeast Region. Mark was born in Caracas, Venezuela, and raised in Park Ridge, New Jersey, where he attended Grove City College in Pennsylvania later. He has served as an assistant refuge manager at Choctaw Refuge, J. and Ding Darling in Florida, Piedmont in Georgia, and Tennessee, as the deputy project leader also at Savannah Coastal Refuges. In May 2007, Mark accepted the position of Chief of the Division of Visitor Services and Communications for the National Wildlife Refuge System in the headquarters office of Arlington, Virginia. He began his current position in Atlanta, Georgia on January 18, 2010. He received the Refuge Manager of the Year Award in 2000 and the Take Pride in America and Fish and Wildlife Service Federal Land Manager of the Year Award in 2005. He and his wife, Linda, have 2 married daughters and 2 grandchildren, so please welcome Mark.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. It's a shame we have to cut this down a little bit. Hopefully we can, if you're patient with us, if we need to go just a little bit over, we can do that. How many people here are refuge managers? Raise your hands. How many of you refuge managers have friends groups? How many do not have friends groups? Is there anybody? We're preaching to the choir this morning. And how many are friends members? Very good, thank you. Well, I'm glad you're here this morning. As we were preparing for this presentation, I thought of the term BHAG. Has anybody heard what a BHAG is? A BHAG is a big, hairy, audacious goal. And when I was working with the Division of Visitor Services, I was looking at trying to have our group think about some visioning and how we wanted to move forward. And I saw this Harvard Business Review article about goal setting and the fact that we need to do something in which it needs to be not just plainly achievable, something that we can probably do, but it's going to take some effort. But it has something that's lofty behind it. And so they came up with this term, a big, hairy, audacious goal. So we're having our conference call talking about this, and I said, so, you know, what do you think is the purpose? What do we want to try to do with this particular session? And Desiree Sorensen Groves said she wanted to know how we could grow the Friends community and create a groundswell so that the Friends movement is the biggest and finest example of the support of public lands in the world. So I consider that a pretty big, hairy, audacious goal, and I'm excited about the opportunity to do that. I think the Friends groups that we have here for the refuge system are some of the best, and we get continually asked by other agencies, how do you guys do that? And it's thanks to the example that you Friends members and you refuge managers that are doing on the ground. But this morning we want to talk a little bit more about Friends and how we can grow. We have a recommendation to a goal to try to have a Friends group at every station, and that is going to be a challenge in itself. I myself would like to see us considerably increase the membership within our Friends, not just numbers of Friends groups, but numbers of participants, active Friends members that are part of the refuge that they love and the refuge system that hopefully we all love. So we have 2 great speakers this morning that are going to talk to you from different perspectives about ways that we can continue to grow our Friends groups, our membership, and our involvement. And hopefully if there's a little bit of time, I'll throw in a couple perspectives that I have from maybe from the agency side and having been a refuge manager. But our first speaker is Birgie Vertesch, and Birgie brings 20 years of direct fundraising and development experience to her position. She is the executive director of the Ding Darling Wildlife Society. Her development experience covers 13 years of education, working in a local hospital system for 3 years, a wildlife hospital for 4 years. She brings a background in all aspects of fundraising, including annual giving, membership, major gifts, special events, capital campaigns, and planned giving. Before entering the fundraising field, she served as an Indiana legislative assistant and then as a lobbyist for a construction association. The skills attained there in past positions have been used quite effectively to build the society to even a stronger position, both in terms of membership and in dollars raised. And with that, we welcome Birgie to speak.
Well, thank you. One of the refuge, I don't know if Paul Tritek's here. I know Tony Westland with the Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge is here, and she knows I can't stand or sit for very long, so I move around a lot. So bear with me, but I'm honored to be here. I'm excited to be here. Everyone says, oh, you're with Ding Darling. You guys have all the money. You have all the big donors. And that's not true. I think you all have those donors in your corners. You have those volunteers. Rick's going to tell us you know, about how to get the volunteers in, and it's up to each and every one of us to build those volunteers to become friends. And I look at all volunteers as a friend of the Ding Darling Refuge, and they may not give cash money, but they certainly give their time, and they love this refuge. And if you haven't started a friends group yet, then those are the first people you go to, are your loyal volunteers who you know well, who you trust, who you know are in it for the right reasons, and they're in it because they love what you do there at the refuge. And you sit down and talk with them and talk to them about what you would like to do. And here in this photo we have the concessionaire and Tony and a donor. So here, this you're going to learn after I speak. Oh, good, another volunteer. That was a voluntold, I'm told. I've not heard that term, a voluntold. So this is someone who said, get out of the house, you're retired, I can't spend much more time with you, go volunteer. Well, Rick's going to tell you how to get those volunteers to actually walk in without feeling bound up and wrapped up. And then this is, hopefully I'll do more than just cracking a whip and teach you guys to really encourage not just yourselves, but your staff, if you're with the refuge, or your volunteers and your friends, on really, yeah, you do need someone kind of with a whip, but not with the whip, so to speak, but with the passion and the love for the mission, to really get people excited to want to continue the difference that's happening at the refuge, and people will want to get behind it. They don't need whipped from behind. So why do people volunteer? We're going to learn that from Rick. Why do people give? Top reasons people give. What are some of the reasons people give and support different organizations? Raise your hands. What do you think? Yeah. Belief in the mission. Yeah. Go ahead, just yell them out. Want to be involved. Someone asks them. So yeah, I mean, we believe in the mission, to give back to the community, respect for the institution and its leadership. And this is where a lot of the refuge staff comes into play, and you'll learn later what the official definition of development is. But development is much more than just raising money and asking for money. It's developing relationships with people, and this is where the refuge staff, by law, you can't ask for money. But you are development officers, and you make that mission alive, and you show what you're doing, and you get people to believe in what you're doing, and that makes the job of the friends groups and the volunteers who can ask for money so much easier, because you're doing your jobs and you have the passion and you're doing it well, and then we can come in and say, this is why we're doing it. You have the kids there that are learning, you see the excitement in their eyes, and you show these donors, that's why we're doing it. It's because of these refuge people that are making this happen. So tax benefits, some people give it for that. That's not the top reason people give, though, when they're asked as to why they give. Some businesses are seeking networking and visibility. Some people do it out of guilt. There was a donor that I received, and he was actually in the photo earlier. He is from Indiana. He owned a paving company, and he paved over all kinds of land, and he felt guilty for what he had done. And so he gave money to this little wildlife hospital because he saw all the animals that had been injured or misplaced. And we built upon that guilt. He loved what they did, and now I'm bringing him over to Ding Darling. He's going to learn what we're doing and see the really good work that we're doing, and hopefully that guilt will move in, and he'll continue to support that other organization and ours. They also give for prestige. They want to be remembered. Some people like to know that their name's going to be continued. They want to teach values to their children. They're personally affected by the cause, turning passion into action. And again, what Rick is going to talk about, bringing volunteers. Your volunteers are your best prospects for donors. And then, she said it, they were asked. You know, so many times people say, why didn't you give? Well, I was never asked. And so you've got to make the ask, and what I always tell people is never be embarrassed. You're not asking for yourself. You believe in that mission, and I think the refuge that spoke yesterday, she goes, I'm in love. She goes, I have a love affair she loves that refuge, and you are loving that refuge and what it does to protect wildlife and educate children. That's what you're asking for. You're asking for that refuge and the mission. And people give because they were asked. So you've got to be making the asks. Okay, fundraising quiz. My organization has all the funds it needs. If you answer yes, then you need to go find another presentation to go to. And you know, it was interesting. I was talking to someone yesterday, and she goes, well, again, she was kind of apologizing. We do get money from the government. And there's so many other organizations that need money. Well, yes, there are. There are so many organizations out there, and we'll learn how many there are out there that are all competing for the dollar. But people give to things that they're interested in and that they're passionate about. And we are passionate about what we do, and the government funding doesn't cover everything. And so we are all in it for the right reasons, and we need to be asking for money. So Americans donated how much last year to charity? Was it $950 million? Was it $8 billion? $291 billion, or 306? Anybody want to guess? $291 billion was given to charity last year. That's a chunk of change, and even in these really hard economic times, it still increased 2%. That's pretty phenomenal. Now, it's still not caught up to where it was 2 years ago, but $291 million is a lot of money, and it's something that we all need to know that is out there. People here in the United States have been raised with the attitude, we have a culture of philanthropy here, and people understand philanthropy, they know the impact it can make, and they give back, which is clear. Which sector does the most money come from? Individuals, foundations, or corporations? I am so glad you said that, because that's absolutely right. People say, oh, it's corporations, it's foundations. Well, if you add up all of the money, that $291 billion, I think 73% comes from direct individuals, I think 8% from bequests, and then from family foundations. It's about 14% of philanthropy comes from that. And you add all that, about half of the family foundations we count as individuals. So it's really about 87% of all philanthropic giving comes from individuals. So don't forget the individuals. You need to work on the corporations, you need to work on the foundations, but your individuals are the ones who are going to truly make an impact on the work that you can do with your friends group and within the refuge. How many nonprofits? There are 2.1 million nonprofits in the United States, and they're all doing wonderful work. And much of that number is not churches. This does not include churches. Some churches do file and do all that, but they don't have to. So that's 2.1 million nonprofits out there asking for money. How many charitable organizations? I used Fort Myers because that's where we're near. And I think many of you will have similar situations where within your 50-mile radius, you will find that you have a lot of nonprofits. Oops, I pushed the wrong number. So within 50 miles, and this was about 5 years ago that I got this number, but it's 1,462, not including churches, within a 50-mile radius of Fort Myers. So again, it goes to reinforce the fact that you need to be very proud of what you all are doing and the impact that you're making on the quality of life that people have living in your area, on the quality of life of the wildlife that you're protecting, on the kids that you're educating to become our next stewards of conservation. And just know that there are a lot of other organizations doing wonderful work, asking for support and believing in their mission just as passionately. And unless you ask and unless you get out in front of people, it's not going to happen. So yes, sometimes giving, this is church attendance, but it kind of goes with giving as well. We had a hurricane in Sanibel, and giving jumped, and then it fell back down. Well, what you want is a steady growth of giving to continue, and it increase like that. Yes, you will have jumps like that in times of fires and earthquakes and all that sort of thing, but just like with volunteers, you want to continually have that growing at a steady pace. So what do people support? I mean, I think we all see this. Religion is the number one, then education, human services, health, public society benefit. Then we have arts, culture, and humanities. We have international affairs, and now we have environmental animals. So 2%. And that did drop a little bit this time around. And I don't know, maybe it's because we're all so overwhelmed with the work with such limited budgets, we haven't taken the time to really get that message out and to really get in front of people and to talk to people about what it is we're doing and why it's so important to support the environment and the protection of animals and all that sort of thing. But it's still $6.6 billion. And that's a lot of money that we can tap into. And I see with all of our efforts here and how we're also inspired by all of these speakers and presentations throughout this week, we're going to move that number up to 3%. That would be wonderful. And then foundations, and then unallocated. So again, Winston Churchill, we make a living by what we get, we make a life by what we give. And again, that goes to what Rick's going to talk about with volunteering and getting involved. People want to make a difference. Here's your technical term for development. It's much more than just asking for money, but really what development is really basically building relationships with people and building friendships with people, thus the friends groups, and making them understand what you're doing and the difference that you make. So again, you know, we've been hearing it all week. We've got shrinking tax revenues, a serious economic downturn. We've got budget cuts. Funding continues to be cut or stretched. This is why the Friends groups can be so instrumental. I see Nancy Marshall over there with the Marshall Foundation. You know, these groups are doing it right. They get it. They know that the government's not going to cover everything, and you guys are still being stretched. And it basically is decreased funding and little room for additional efforts that we all want to see happen. And so again, you know, a quote by Ding Darling is, you know, if we don't stay active and involved, what is going to happen? So we have to, you know, listen to what we learned today and keep moving. So government funding only covers a small portion. So I often tell people, how many people here today have attended a state university or a state college? Well, I also tell people will say, oh, well, you get government funding. And I'll say, yeah, you're absolutely right. We do receive government funding. But did you attend a state school or a state university, or did one of your children or grandchildren or neighbors? Well, yeah. Well, they too receive state funding, and they don't have barely enough to give the students the kind of education that they want to give. And as a result, they rely on private philanthropy to make a difference. It's the same with us. Government funding is being cut. It does not cover what we can do in the areas of education and making a difference. And people who are passionate about that will want to support your refuge. Oops. So this is why. And then friends groups, again, we're here, friends groups, and I think it's important for the friends groups to understand that we're here to support the refuge. We're not here to shape policy. We're here to help the NWRA show up in Washington if they need us to go testify, and they'll help us in those directions, to write letters, to send emails, to fly out there. But you know, our mission is pure and simple to help the refuge and their managers and their staff do their work at educating, at protecting, at doing research. And we do that because we see what they're doing and the good that they're doing, and that's why we're there to help them do that work. So again, you know, you develop a solid base, and you know, a lot of these things you're probably thinking to yourself, ugh, you know, I don't even have a friends group. Well, you know, it just, you can start small, so don't get overwhelmed by thinking, oh, they've raised, you know, all this money to build a new building and do that. Think small, you know, maybe you can get a group of friends together to start a small project and really have a success. Maybe it's, I was talking to this gentleman over here, and they have sandhill cranes, but they don't have access to their refuge. Well, maybe raise some money or talk to a local car dealer and some donors, and maybe they can donate a 15-passenger van where the refuge manager will work with them to give private tours inside the refuge to go see the sandhill cranes. That could be a really successful effort. It gets the friends groups excited. They say, okay, what more can we do? And they sit down with the refuge manager, and they say, okay, and they give them ideas. So again, you know, breaking down, you've got $291 billion, and you've got all of this coming in, and again, it's from individuals. So don't lose your focus on the individuals. Don't lose your focus on working on grants and foundations either, but individuals are your #1 donor. Again, with friends groups, board training is key. I don't know who knows Jim Sprankle here, but he used to be on the NWRA's board. You know, he's so excited, and this is what you want your board members to be. You want them to feel so proud about being involved and being excited. Now, I think he had just received a baseball for his baseball collection when this photo was taken, but this is how it is. You see Paul Tritek in the back, the refuge manager. You know, you have that teamwork. I go to staff meetings with the refuge staff, not weekly, but maybe once a month, where I sit down and I learn what they're doing. They hear what I'm doing, and I reinforce with their staff that they are also out there talking to the public, and they're helping me do my job because they are showing what they're doing and telling people what they're doing, and people get excited. So with board training, it's not just sitting in a room and having them talk to the refuge manager. It's really sitting down and telling them what, have a job description. Walk through the things that you're needing. Walk through some of the needs and why it's important to be supporting the refuge. Have a little fundraising 101. And have different committees and have people. So really make it take them through if you have a concessionaire or if you have things that you can take them through. If the refuge is closed to the public, get a van, get a boat, get them through there and show them what they're supporting and get their hands wet, get their feet dirty, so that they truly understand and appreciate what it is that they are getting behind. And most importantly, the staff saying thank you. So again, it's getting your message out, being consistent with your message. And again, to have an annual major gifts program, you need a lot of these things all working together. And a case for support, it just demonstrates relevancy. You have education, you have the beauty of nature, you have the kids, you have the refuge. It's a whole thing. It's a whole group of things that's going on there at the refuge that's making an impact. Public relations, getting the word out in any way you can. So again, if you're small, you have 2 people in your friends group and you're trying to get the word out. People want to be a part of something successful. Yes, you may have a hurricane come through or a tornado, but you'll also see a lot of organizations crying poor and saying, oh, woe is me. Yes, we do talk about the government cutbacks and people get that, and I think that's an important message. But all in all, people want to know that they are investing in a strong organization because they've worked darn hard for that $291 billion that's been given away. And they want to make darn sure that it's being invested well and being invested in the way that they've been told it's going to be invested. So they like to be a part of it. So you make people feel good. You get the big checks and you get pictures and you send them to your papers. And most people, and I'll have it later too, that most communities do have local weekly rags that will print every single press release you send them, and you stick in a photo and do all that. They'll print every single word, and you do that on a regular basis. And they're finding that people are reading these weekly newspapers regularly from page to page, word for word, because it's positive. So much of today's news in the daily papers is just, you're depressed when you get done reading. So these weekly papers are positive. They're talking about the good things are happening. People are getting excited. Send those releases. Send the pictures to your local. I say a speakers bureau, and you're going, oh. Well, Paul Tritek and Tony Westland and the refuge staff have been wonderful. And they get called on to speak often. So they'll call the friends group. They'll call me and they'll say, Birgie, I'm going to go speak at Kiwanis or Rotary. And you all can call them. Don't wait for them to call on you. Just say, we've got some phenomenal speakers. We'd love to have our biologist come and speak. We'd love to have our refuge manager come and speak. We'd love to have our education specialist come and speak and maybe bring some of the kids who've benefited from these education programs to come to these programs. Because my attitude is, there's always at least 1 or 2 people in that big group. Now that Rotary and that Kiwanis and that Optimist Club may have money to give as well, which many of them do, but there's usually 1 or 2 in that group who have a whole lot more to give, or who have connections to others who have a whole lot more to give. That might be a future friend member, that might be a donor, that might become a volunteer, and it's really important to get out as often as you can and have that consistent message. So when Tony or Paul go and speak, they say, Birgie, can you come join me? And if I can, I do. And we always end, they give the presentation, they go, I'd like to introduce you to Birgie. She's with our friends group, and let her tell you a little bit about what they do. And you always end every presentation, if you can, if there is a friend or a volunteer there, with the importance of their private support and what it makes a difference in doing. People want to know that it makes a difference. So special events, those people in that group there. So again, I'll mention Tony like I see her in the background there, but I always say to her, and now she says it to me, which is wonderful, you don't get unless you ask. So again, that's one of the main reasons people say they haven't given, is because they haven't been asked. And the same goes true for everything. So, if you see something in your community, if you see someone coming, whether it's DeWitt Jones or Sylvia Earle, and you see they're coming into the community, call them up, call up their office, write them an email, and that's what I did with the grandson of Jacques Cousteau. So Fabien Cousteau was coming to the Fort Myers area to give several presentations. And it was advertised months ahead of time, so I Googled and I looked up the number and I found an email, and I sent probably 3 different emails to 3 different people, not knowing who it would go to. and said, you know, we are a national wildlife refuge. We believe in the same things of conservation and all this sort of thing. We'd love to have you come as our guest. We can't afford to pay you. But we'd love to set you up at an oceanfront home overnight and have you stay and meet with some of our friends and refuge staff and give you a behind-the-scenes tour of the refuge. Well, after several yeses and nos, and now my schedule's changed, he actually did show up at the very last minute. But he came, and he promoted and talked about his organization. But I think, again, what we all need to understand, and I think that's what we're learning through this conference, is collaboration is key. We can't be all things to all people. We can't do everything. So I think working together and understanding the importance that I'm a true believer in, he talked, you know, Fabien Cousteau talked about his organization, Plant a Fish. And these people, the friends that were there and some of our top donors that were there may go support Plant a Fish. But they felt really good that we helped put that together. We invited all of the other conservation organizations on the island to join with us for this luncheon. We invited our friends and special donors. So that table is all set up with, we've got 2 volunteers, both big donors. One gave us a challenge grant just recently. It was their first family gift that they made to us. I didn't even know they had a family foundation. And they gave us a challenge of $25,000 to help build a children's education trail through the mangroves. The one over to the far right gives us all the money due to the relationships that she's built with the refuge staff and the feelings that she sees and the work that they do with the kids. She gives us all the money for the busing system to bring 4,000, 5,000 kids by buses to schools. And the one next to her is just a smaller donor, but she's the wife of the president and CEO of Philip Morris and Company. And I knew her through Indiana University, where I worked. And they have a home on Sanibel, and I know they're there, so I'm cultivating her. And she gives us gifts, but they have the capability of doing a whole lot more, and she loves to scuba dive, so they were thrilled. So you think of things that you can do for this. Never be afraid to ask if there's people coming in. This is our weekly paper, and again, they print everything. Those are our scholarship recipients. We received our first endowed scholarship from a long-time volunteer, and again, Rick's gonna tell us how we get these volunteers in the door and active and involved and happy to be there. And then they start leaving us in their will. They start giving us money. They like to see that these kids are coming through and educated, and we send these out and have a special ceremony where we invite the donors, and you know, so invite them and get them out there. You know, go to retirement communities. Again, just get out there and speak, whether it's you yourself or volunteers or refuge staff that you team up together. But people are always looking for speakers, and we do such amazing work within the refuges in so many different areas that you could have a different speaker each week for many times at an organization with a different face. And then they really get the picture of the work that's going on at the refuge and the impact that it makes in their community. And also talk about the economic benefits. So I was at the Rotary the other day, and we talked about some of the educational things that were happening in the kids, and we had pictures of kids. But then I also talked about the economic impact, because a lot of their members in Rotary are business owners and business leaders. And when you give that economic impact of the refuge on the community, it really hits home with them as well. So you find gated communities, retirement homes. Not only are they great resources for possible volunteers, but they're also great resources for people. They are desperate for speakers. And they love to either have you go there or they bring their buses out to you and you can speak with them. And again, your elevator speech, and I'll get to that, but communicate. So we have a little electronic newsletter, the Ding on the Wing. And if you haven't signed up for that, I would encourage you to do that. I'll bring plenty of cards. But again, it's really easy. It's a constant contact. It's, you can try it free for 30 days and set it up and see how easy it is. It's really user-friendly. I'm not that great with computers, and I can do it, so it really is, it's great. And it's a great way to get word out to people. So, you know, the other ways you can communicate are through phone calls, Facebook, personal emails, Twitter, which I just learned about and I'm still learning about, and other things. So, you know, just, again, just talking to people in ways that you would like to be talked to and informed about and that sort of thing. And again, just the consistent message. So just like this bird, you know, he's out for the hunt, and he stretched his neck way out, and he went for it, and he got it. And unless we stretch our necks out and really go for it and get in front of people, it's not going to happen. So the elevator speech, I think you've all heard that. It's a quick little speech that takes you from one floor to another in an elevator, so it's about 30 seconds that you have. Or you go to a dinner party and say, oh, Birgie, what are you doing? Well, I work, you know, this is why I'm doing it. I'd love to invite you for a behind-the-scenes tour. Can you come? And it's just a quick little down and dirty thing, but it needs to be enough to grab their attention, and everybody on your board, everybody, needs to have that same consistent message so that people, I just heard that from Tom the other day. Maybe I should go get a tour. So, increasing your number of friends. So, just like this guy, that was a great party. I got 3 new donors. You love your refuge. You love what you're doing. And it's talking to them and wanting them to be a part of it. So, you can talk to people till you're blue in the face, but unless you start tracking their names and addresses and consistently getting that message out, you're not going to be overly effective. So you need to have a good database of people, and you need to start building that database. So our database includes current donors, past donors. It includes volunteers, if I can get their names, that are not donors. And we try and work on doing that. And then I also get lists from volunteers and also Friends members who give us their country club membership or their church memberships or their neighborhood memberships. And even though they all say, well, you're not supposed to share this with anybody else, they all do. So then you get volunteers to enter their names into your database. You can do it in your evening while you're watching American Idol or something and type in names. But you build that database up so that when you do send a solicitation letter, they're on there, and they may make a gift this time. You never know what's going to turn someone on, and each message is different. One message might be about the research that's going on. One message might be about education. One message might be about the peril of one type of wildlife species that's been saved because of the refuge. Someone will get turned on by something, and it's consistently getting that message to them, and then eventually they're going to write that check, and then you'll have even that much more opportunity to get to know those people. So we use Donor Perfect. These are 2 different types of fundraising software. Raiser's Edge is kind of like the creme de la creme. It's really expensive. But some people do it. And there might, maybe you have friends whose kids or spouses or they themselves work for one of these companies, and they can get it for you for free. But again, you don't get unless you ask, so find out. We use Donor Perfect. It's great. It's fairly inexpensive. It's fairly user-friendly. They now have an online version, so I can actually work from home and do that as well. So solicitations. So what do solicitations do? Is it just asking for money and getting money? No, that's a big part of it. Of course, you want to make money if you send out a solicitation, but it's also to bring in new members, and it's also to educate. So a lot of the letters that we send out there's always something they're going to learn. We educated 4,000 students. You can't do everything in one letter, but they can learn something about something that you're doing, and that should be part of your goal of your letter, because my attitude is if you can cover your expenses, you may not make any money on the solicitation letter. But if you cover your expenses and you don't lose anything, you've done amazing things, because you've just educated however many thousands of people are in your database about the things that you're doing. And it's amazing how we'll see gift envelopes. We code our gift envelopes so we know what they come from. Was it the newsletter? Was it the mailing? Was it whatever? And we can track that. Well, we get some envelopes that they received 2 years ago. And they hold them, they put them in a pile, and they obviously leave it there for future use, and they're listening to it, they're reading it, they're being reminded, oh yeah, I gotta make a gift. One of these days they'll hit that and they'll do that. So there's 3 types of solicitations. There's written, electronic, and there's face-to-face. The telethons used to be the big thing. People are still doing them. A lot of the universities are doing them, and very effectively, but it's very time-intensive and people-intensive, and a lot of people don't like to be bothered at home by the phone anyway. Written solicitations, we do membership renewals, and we're going to try and give our volunteers automatic membership in the Friends group so that they will have their names and addresses, because right now I don't know if they're a volunteer unless they tell me. And so it does a disservice a little bit in that if we receive a gift, I can't send a thank you note that also says, oh, and thank you so much for your time. You can't imagine what your time does to help this refuge and the impact it has on kids. I can't do that unless I know they're a volunteer. So we've got to find a way to bridge and maybe thinking outside the box, like they were saying in some of these sessions, to see how we can work with the refuge staff in getting those names and addresses of the volunteers to the Friends group so that we can educate them and inform them and solicit them. They may not give to us because in many of their minds, their time is their gift, which is a huge gift. And we want to thank them for that gift appropriately. And then we also send out a general solicitation. And these are just some samples of solicitations. My attitude is you need to keep your solicitation to no more than a page. It needs to be fairly large font that's readable. Am I okay on time? Oh, okay, so I can tell you what we raised from this. It's always good to track what you raise, what you spend, and what it costs to make $1. But again, it's all about that. So cultivation. You know, you work with your donors, you make them happy, you feel good, you write thank you notes, you give them phone calls, you do all this sort of thing to make them proud of what they're doing. You have special clubs. You know, your best prospects are your most loyal donors and volunteers. And they're the people who are in the family, so to speak. They're also your best prospects for planned giving. 69% of all planned gifts come from donors who give less than $500 a year. So keeping people happy, saying thank you. They say you can't say thank you enough. Get your acknowledgement letters mailed quickly. If you can't do it, get some volunteers to do it. Some of those retirement communities, we have people who have gorgeous handwriting and would love to write thank you notes, and we do that. So, you know, thank them as often as you can. If you take photos, give them a photo and say thank you. Again, phone calls, personal visits. So again, like this lady, you know, I have a very small home, and I've got 2 dogs with dog hair in the corners, and I still invite donors over for dinner, and they love it. You know, it doesn't bother me that my house isn't pristine, that I don't have the crystal chandelier. People feel good about being invited and included, and you invite other donors. You invite some who you'd like to be a donor, like the wife of the president of Philip Morris and Company, and you talk about what you're doing. Invite some of the refuge staff to come with you. I've had Paul and Tony come on several calls with me where we had, you know, homemade pound cake and coffee to talk about some projects, and it works. So, you know, God gave you a gift of 86,400 seconds today. Have you used one to say thank you? And it's, you know, Rick is going to say that too. Thanking your volunteers, making them feel proud of their work. It all turns into usually more than just their time. They also give of their finances too. So just saying thank you. And again, these are all photos from donors and volunteers and friends members who sent us photos. But you know, they love to share. So they love to share their expertise. They love to share their connections. You know, we have one of our board members whose mother is a best friend of theirs, and her son wrote the book, The Big Year. Has anybody read that book? Okay, love it. It's fabulous. Well, a movie's coming out in October with Steve Martin, Jack Black, and Owen Wilson, I think, is in it. It's about birding. And he's agreed to come and speak because he loves Sanibel, and he's visited Sanibel, came for a lecture. So tap into people you know whose kids or grandkids may be doing something, whether it's in wildlife conservation. They may just love wildlife. You know, maybe it's a future DeWitt Jones and that sort of thing. It's not just about the sharing of the photos, it's sharing their knowledge, it's sharing their connections and all that sort of thing, and tapping into that resource. So again, we're going to leave questions for later. So thank you very much.
We have so much information to share with you in so little time. So I want to introduce.
Why don't you go down there so I can try?
Okay. I want to introduce Rick Lynch. I hope some of you have been through some of the courses we've had at NCTC for volunteer training. Rick has been one of the key instructors for that. But Rick is the co-author of the book Volunteer Management. It's the best-selling book in its field in the U.S. and China and the Ukraine. He's conducted those basic and advanced volunteer management courses at NCTC. He is a Seattle-based management consultant who specializes in issues facing not-for-profit organizations. He's done volunteer management workshops in the U.S., Canada, Australia, Britain, Ireland, Russia, and Singapore. Each year he speaks at approximately 100 workshops around the world and conferences on these topics of volunteer management and leadership effectiveness. So I'll turn it over to Rick.
Thank you. I was amazed by Birgie's ability to do 2 hours worth of a workshop in 30 minutes. Standing here in awe. We're looking here at recommendation 11 in the draft plan is that everybody should have a friends group. This is an ambitious goal, but I think it's an essential goal because all of the ambitious goals in that document can't be accomplished by a few underpaid staff. To be successful, you've got to have friends. But not just for its own sake, not just to have a friends group and say, we've got one, count that off, but the friends group needs to have a purpose and a clear sense of purpose, because what attracts people to joining friends groups isn't just the sense of camaraderie, although that can be certainly a part of it, but also to be connected to a purpose larger than themselves. To be successful, a refuge needs to be able to engage the community as a partner in accomplishing that refuge's mission. And I think that if we look at this, and I base this on some polling data, there are at least 20% of the population around you that cares about what you do. And basically, it's a matter of letting those people know that they can be helpful. Unfortunately, sometimes those 20% don't even know there is a refuge nearby. Often, if they are aware of the refuge, they have no clue there's a friends group they could join to engage in furthering the aims there. One of the things to keep in mind as you are trying to enlarge your friends group and maintain the people that you have in it is that today's potential friends have a different set of values than yesterday's potential friends. It used to be that people would join friends groups and do just about anything out of a sense of duty, and there are still some people like that. But today's potential friends tend to be cause-oriented people. They tend to want to do something significant so that they feel like they are doing something that's important, that's making a difference. And there are lots of exceptions to this, but again, it used to be that people would sit and stuff the envelopes for a mailing. This is less and less likely to be true. And the other key thing about people who are going to be volunteering to join friends groups in the future is that they want a short-term commitment. It used to be that, my parents' generation would sign up and volunteer someplace for the rest of their lives. And this is less and less true. It's harder and harder to find such people. In reaction to that, the natural tendency is to try to keep them from leaving. And there is a horrible thing that happens when you do that, because the more pressure people feel to stay, the more likely they will be to leave. And oddly enough, those people who are going to be successful in keeping friends involved are the ones who are willing to let them go. My suggestion would be that we let them go, but they're still part of the friends group. They may not be actively involved at the present time, but they're still part of the group. And I think the style of being a friends group member in the future is going to be one that I would describe as serial involvement, where I'm involved for a while, and then I kind of drift away, and then I'm involved for a while again on an active basis. Another thing is that the friends group should not feel like a job. One of the things that scared me about the draft document when it talks about volunteers is that who better to run a volunteer program for a refuge than a retired human resource manager? The problem is that those people will make it feel like a job. And it used to be in the old days that worked pretty well. People actually did kind of like having a volunteer opportunity that felt like a job. But that's less and less likely to be true in the future. People who volunteer today tend to already have a job, and they don't want to go do something else that feels that same way. And I think one of the other key things here is that new friends need to feel welcome. As you get somebody in, one of the things that sometimes happens when you have a membership group is that you get a new person, and they walk into the room that first time at that first meeting. And there are all these people there who are friendly and happy and talking and buzzing around, and they don't know anybody, and they kind of stand there feeling uneasy and uncomfortable. People don't enjoy feeling uneasy and uncomfortable, and so they may just come to one meeting. So I think there needs to be an organized, intentional effect to just bomb them with, oh boy, we're so glad you're part of our group, and to get to know people. Before the person shows up for the first meeting, the existing group members ought to know some interesting things about that person's background. Maybe they know 3 things about that person so they could go up and start talking to them about something that they may have in common with that person. And there ought to be an intentional movement to try to get people to engage that person on a personal basis. One of the themes that ran through what Birgie was saying was that it's all about relationships. And relationships are basically the key to fundraising. It's also the key to keeping the Friends group growing and enlarging itself. She was talking about people that may give you a little bit of money and give you a huge gift at the end. I work in England 3 or 4 times a year, and last time I was over there, somebody told me about, he was a fundraising person for an organization there called the Lifeboats. And there was this one woman who gave him £5 a year. And it was almost more trouble than it was worth, because he felt, you know, it was just administering that whole £5. But every year he wrote a thank you note to her, thanking her for her gift. And sometimes he thought, oh, for £5, do you really deserve a thank you note? She died recently and left them £1 million. So he was thinking, boy, I sure am glad I wrote those thank you notes. That was really, really good. One of the ideas about enlarging your friends group, just as a model of this, is to have maybe an annual event if you're already well established, or do this more often if you haven't been established, is to have every staff person at the refuge, every friend, every volunteer bring a friend of theirs to an event, an educational event at the refuge. And the basic thing is we'd like the community to know what we do and why it's important. And tell them, we're not going to ask you for money, don't worry, okay? And what we do there is we might take them on a tour of the refuge, we might do a little presentation, but the most important thing to do at that thing is to get to know those people. Find out what their interests are, find out what skills they have, maybe some things they'd like to do, find out things they've done in their past that brought them a sense of fulfillment, and start thinking about how could we use those talents and interests to further what we're doing as a friends group. And then kind of keep some notes, and then after that thing is over, contact those people and say, you know, it sure was interesting talking to you about that interest of yours. And it occurred to me that one of the things you might enjoy doing would be to join our friends group and do some of that stuff for us. Okay? So oftentimes what we do at these kinds of things, if we have them at all, is to try to sell them on how important our work is, and that is something to do there. But the most important thing is to get to know those people, to express some interest in them, and start to build that relationship. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about recruitment here. And recruitment is sometimes thought of as convincing people to do something. But that's not really the way that you should think about volunteer recruitment or friends group recruitment, because volunteering is voluntary. People only volunteer because they want to. And so trying to convince somebody to do something they don't really want to do is not going to be, in the long run, a very fruitful thing to try. So the way I would define recruitment is letting somebody know that it's possible to do something they already want to do. And again, there are people in your community who want to be part of the friends group. They may not know it exists. They may not know it's possible to join. And just letting them know that that's available is kind of the essence of recruitment. To do effective recruitment, I think what we need to do is to target our message. Rather than trying to send one message to the community at large, trying to appeal to as wide a population as possible, we ought to send several different messages, each aimed at a particular segment of the population to try to appeal to those people's needs and wants and values and desires. And the reason for this is that when you send a message to everybody in general, you often wind up speaking to nobody in particular. There are some steps to go through in, well, just to give you an example, if you are talking to hunters about being involved, there are hunters who would love to be involved to conserve the wildlife. The message to get them involved might be a very different message than Sierra Club members, for example. Okay? Both actually want to conserve the wildlife, but they have different values and standards. So a message crafted for one might turn off the other. And so what we do when we send one message out is we kind of water it down so it doesn't really appeal to either group all that well. So the idea behind targeting is to focus that message on the fears, needs, hopes, dreams, desires of the target group. And there are some steps to go through here that I want to run through with you quickly. The first step when you think about getting new people into the Friends group is to think, who already wants to be involved? What are some kinds of people in our community that already care about what we do? And then after you've identified that, you might think, well, what do they do instead of being part of our Friends group? What do they do with their spare time? Because a Friends group, basically all the things you do are leisure time activities for somebody. And so what is it that they now do with their leisure time? And the reason for asking that question is that it helps us answer question number 3, which is, where are they? Where can we find them? Are there places that our target group is likely to go to worship? Are there shops they are potentially customers of? So if you were after hunters, for example, you might go to a gun shop. Okay? Maybe an interesting place to recruit friends for the refuge. There might be particular neighborhoods in some cases. There might be some recreational activities that they are likely to want to participate in. There may be clubs they already belong to. There may be certain political groups they are likely to be part of. So if you're going to recruit people, you need to know who already wants to do this, and then where are they, so that we know where to take our message. The answer to this question, where are they, heavily implies the answer to the next question, which is, what method are we going to use to communicate with them? If they are members of organizations, then a presentation to that group would be obviously an effective method of getting your word to them. If there are physical locations in which they are likely to be found, a poster or a booth might be an effective way to do this. If where they are is sitting at home on their computer, then what internet sites are they likely to be found at? And so how can we get our message to them through that internet site? I'll give you an example of this. There's a group, again in England, that was trying to get students to volunteer for them, young people to volunteer. And when they went through this process and asked what do they do with their time instead of volunteering for us, the answer came back from the group, well, they're in the pub. Okay. So, okay, how do we get a message to people in the pub? And in pubs in Britain, all the brewing companies give the pubs free beer coasters, those little things you set glasses on so you don't make rings on the table. These people actually had a group of custom-designed beer coasters made, which they then gave to the pubs near the universities. And here's the front and back of the coaster. So you get there, you pick up your beer, and there's a little recruitment message right underneath it, so that people would know that they would come there. After we look at those questions, the next one is what will we say to them? So, and this kind of goes back to why they want to be involved already. So we need to craft a message that appeals to the needs, dreams, desires, fears, motivations of that particular target group, so that we can lay out as powerful a case to them as possible as to why they should get involved. One little last thing on integrating new members. Again, I think this is a really key thing to do, is to prepare the group for new members, so that when they come in that first time, they feel just unbelievably welcome, that there's no discomfort, that it feels like a good place for them to be. Also, offering them an active role right away. Friends groups basically are made up of doers and belongers. And there's nothing wrong with being a belonger, but the group that actually does the work in the friends group tends to be rather small. And those people then tend to get burned out. And those people then tend to hog all the good stuff. And so what we want to do is to encourage people to be doers right away, give them something active that they can get their teeth into. Usually people don't join just to belong. Some may, but usually they don't. And sometimes we're afraid to ask them to do too much right at the beginning, but if you ask them to do too little, it's not going to meet their needs for joining in the first place, because they want to do something significant. Another one of these is to, make sure that at the beginning they know what the plan is for the friends group and how that relates to the plan of the refuge. In another session I mentioned that strategic planning ought to be done sequentially, so you do the refuge plan first and then the friends group plan second, to look at how the friends group can accomplish things that the refuge can't afford to do with their paid staff resources. And one of the things, real key things here, is so people know that when they are out there advancing their personal opinions about something, they aren't representing the friends group, that there is a time that the friends group speaks with one voice, so that somebody doesn't run off and write a letter to the editor and then put, member friends group after their name. That in order to speak officially as part of the friends group, it needs to be agreed on by the membership or the officers of the friends group, so that we avoid the lone rangers. It is 9:57 according to my clock, and I'm from Seattle, so it must be almost noon here. Do you want to do questions at this point in the last 3 minutes here?
I'd just like to add a couple additional comments from maybe from my perspective as a refuge manager and also working as in the regional office. I think that it's pretty exciting that friends have now become an important vocabulary, part of the vocabulary of the refuge system. For me as a refuge manager, our friends group was an extension of our refuge team, and they were critical. I mean, a lot of reasons why we look at why we want friends groups. We see the opportunities for them to do the advocacy that we can't do sometimes. They can do some fundraising. They can do the projects when we need warm bodies out there to help us. But I think one of the things that we really need to look at and having friends help us with is the aspect of relevancy. We've been talking about that all week. The need to be able to have the American public relate to and appreciate what conservation is all about. And we have tremendous places as refuges for them to come out and do that. And so I think that we need to work on being able to have our friends groups help us with relevancy, and in doing that, I think they're also going to be able to build their own capacity. We all have that sense of wonder, whether you're a child or a big child, an adult. I think we need to be able to draw the public in at all ages to have that encounter. Once we have that encounter, I think we get the connections, and then when you do that, you get them engaged and you get them interested in working as well. I think some of the ways that we can do that is, Birgie mentioned it, is the power of story. I think when you can tell your message and why that refuge is such a special place, and you're out there going to all those different locations that, or opportunities that Rick mentioned, and you can tell your story, that's the best thing going. I saw that as a refuge manager. I could go to a meeting before the Water Management District or before a county commission, and they would listen to my comments, but they also said, you know, he's paid, he's the refuge manager, or that's the refuge biologist. But when the local citizen came up and talked so passionately about their refuge, it made a huge difference in what those county commissioners heard. So your story is important, it's unique, and when we have a whole bunch of people telling our story about how neat that place is and the opportunity to connect, I think we can draw more people in to participate. I think there's a great opportunity for us as friends groups to be able to capitalize on citizen science. I think that's the next way that we're really going to connect a lot of people. There's lots of opportunities out there, whether it be through the birding program that we're working on, whether it be through the National Phenology Network. But if we as friends groups can get people, you're the community-based opportunity that we have. If we can draw people in and give them a chance to see what happens every day in nature and journal and do the phenology, they can take that back and do it in their backyard, and we continue to get those connections, but then you get people drawing together. There's lots of opportunities through the Master Naturalist program. You have folks out there, when they go through that, they agree to commit to go out and volunteer and work in the community. Take advantage of using those folks out in your refuge through your friends groups. Also, we have tremendous opportunities through high schools. I know in Florida, when I was there, every high school student has to have 100 hours of volunteer time, volunteer service in order to graduate. Put them to work and get credit for them working out on the refuge. And we can build our volunteer and our friends members that way. So just a couple other things that I want to take it from a little bit different perspective. I think in terms of maintaining our friends groups and growing them, I think one is we have to do effective succession planning. We worry about that as leaders in the Fish and Wildlife Service and the refuge system. How do we grow our next generation of refuge leaders and service leaders? And we need to do that when it comes to our friends boards. As soon as we're on there, we need to be looking at who else we can come in to be our replacement and keep that going so we have effective boards moving on. I think we have to accept change. I know when I was a refuge manager at Loxahatchee, there were 4 different Friends Board presidents during my tenure that was there. Each one brought their own strengths. Some maybe had some weaknesses, but we worked around the weaknesses and we used those strengths. And it's not a calamity when the refuge manager leaves. For the Friends Board, it shouldn't be. You know, the next manager, hopefully we're getting the best person we can get to come in and be there. We have to embrace the change and keep growing as we go through that. I think besides the training that we talked about the last couple of days that we need for friends groups, I think we need to continue the training for refuge managers. It's such a fast pace. We're encouraging friends groups to grow, to question and learn about what's going on at their refuges. And for some refuge managers that aren't used to that, it might be scary. But we need to be able to train our refuge managers to understand the value of the friends groups, their expectations, and how we work together in having a good relationship. So that's critical for us as well. And the last thing I'll just add, has been said several times, I know Ann mentioned it several times yesterday in her presentation, is we have to have fun. What a greater place to work than on a National Wildlife Refuge. And if all we do is make it a job, it's not going to be fun. So as you work in your friends group, as you work in volunteers, you as refuge managers, get your folks out there to continue that sense of wonder in ourselves and get them to enjoy being out there as part of the refuge. So I think those are all critical points. We don't have much time. It's 12 o'clock. But we do want to, if there's time for questions, we can do that. So there's no time to eat today. It's more important that you ask questions, and we're here to help you with that and get your photograph. And we ate enough yesterday, we can go a couple meals without that. No. What we'll do is, if you want to stay and ask questions, we'll be here to be able to answer them. You should have email addresses for all of us. If there's a way that we can answer questions for you after the session's over, please feel free to contact any one of us. I'm sure we'd be more than happy to answer any way we can. Thank you for your time.